lynx is one of the world's few wildcats that has adapted to cold weather. Today, the lynx survives only in a small area of its original range. It now lives mainly in the high-timbered forests of Scandinavia and Russia at the edges of the frozen wastes of the tundra. Some cats, like this one, still survive in isolated pockets in places like Estonia, on the southern shore of the Baltic Sea, south of Finland. Even here, the sound of the chainsaw and the tractor have invaded the forest. Their refuge shrinks daily, and with no other place to go, they will soon have to surrender to the advance of civilization. Of all the threats against the lynx, the most serious is the international fur trade. The demand for spotted cat skins continues in spite of growing worldwide opposition. The lynx can't survive the pressure of hunters who harvest skins without regard for the species' survival, nor can it stand the abuse of developers who actively destroy its range, pushing the remaining cats closer to extinction. The future of the lynx will be in danger as long as man continues to portray the lynx as a competitor rather than as a constructive member of the natural community. But old superstitions are hard to shake. Today, Russian farmers still guard against night raids on their livestock. Hunters who depend on game as a major source of food accuse the lynx of killing deer, moose, and elk. For those who share the lynx's habitat in the northern reaches of the former Soviet Union, the cat is a threat most would prefer to see eliminated. Man's attitude toward the lynx as a savage killer is hard to shake because the cat remains a fundamental part of man's deep-seated anxieties about the beasts that prowl the forest. The image people have of the cat as the master of the forest is a carryover from the same fantasy they have about the lion being the king of the jungle. And while that image may have helped the lion over time, it has definitely hurt the lynx. Too often, we judge an animal by its skill as a predator. The cat embodies the traits we admire most in ourselves, such as strength and cunning. We think the large cat is at the top of the prey-predator order, where it has few enemies and seems to control its own destiny. That's its allure. But the image is a false one. The lynx is anything but the fierce, independent cat we imagine. The lynx is a reclusive, solitary animal. Innately cautious and distrustful, it'll go out of its way to avoid contact with humans. But the gradual expansion of civilization into the domain of the lynx has forced it to emigrate farther and farther from its original range, abandoning its habitat in search of refuge, a refuge that shrinks every day as men cut down forests for lumber and clear land for new farms. By continuing to intrude in the cat's domain, man has upset the balance nature has created over time. But the lynx can share the forest with man. In order to coexist, people will have to see the cat as a constructive member of the natural community rather than as a competitor. This female is stalking a roe deer. Unlike the big cats of Africa, lynxes can't run down their prey. Their heart mass is too small for their body to withstand the prolonged physical strain of a high-speed chase and kill. For this cat, a successful hunt depends upon delicacy and patience. Carefully, she closes in on the deer, planning her attack. Lynxes can't tackle healthy adult game such as moose, elk, or deer. She'll go after only unguarded young or animals that are sick or injured. She shadows her quarry, careful not to be detected. She'll have to get close enough so she can seize the deer in 1 or 2 bounds, because she can only run at full speed for 30 or 40 meters. Patiently, she works her way closer. Even though her attack has failed, she won't give up the chase. She'll continue to stalk the deer for miles. At first, she'll stay back far enough not to alarm them. But then, she will move in slowly and wait for the opportunity that will reward her patience. She's uniquely adapted to hunting in the snow. She has powerful, high limbs and large, furry paws that work like snowshoes, distributing her weight so she can move across packed snow without falling through the crust. In places where natural predators such as the lynx have disappeared, the populations of deer have exploded, straining all the available natural food resources. Without the lynx to cull the herd, the weaker animals will die slowly of starvation during the winter months. Ironically, the lynx performs a service to those same hunters who condemn it by culling out animals that are no longer viable. Culling strengthens the herd's gene pool. But those who see only the bloodied carcass in the snow don't understand the cat's role as a game manager. Instead, they see only what they want to see, the lynx as a savage killer. The lynx didn't always hunt deer. Their traditional game of choice used to be the mountain hare. But when the mountain hares started to disappear, the lynx had to adapt or perish, so it turned to larger game. In places where the lynx still hunts mountain hare, its role as a game manager is clearer. In fact, its reproduction cycle is tied to the mountain hares. When the population of the hare explodes, so does the population of lynx. And when the hare population crashes as part of its natural cycle, the lynx follows. Where the mountain hare still survives, the lynx hunts it almost exclusively. But changes in habitat created by the intrusion of civilization have disrupted these natural cycles. The lynx has an excellent sense of sight, but the winter camouflage of the hare makes it difficult to see against the snowy background. The lynx has to rely on its sharpest sense, that of hearing. Its hearing is so sensitive that it can hear a shrill whistle nearly 3 miles away, compared to a dog which can hear the same whistle less than 2 miles away. The hare uses all it knows in its inventory of survival tricks, but the lynx has hunted this prey for thousands of years. It knows the pattern of feints and dodges. It knows the hare will look for cover and that patience and finesse will produce results rather than brute force. Its attack, when it comes, will be swift and certain. Like most cats, the lynx kills with a powerful bite to the nape of the neck that dislocates the cervical vertebrae and kills instantly. This spirited game of catch and toss is the result of excess energy left over from the hunt. The lynx discharges this pent-up tension by continuing the chase, even though its prey is dead. Finally, it drags the hare into the protective cover of the woods where it can feed undisturbed. The mountain hare is almost gone in Central Europe now. Its disappearance has forced the lynx to look for substitute prey, anything from large game to birds and mice. The lynx is a consummate hunter, able to detect even the faintest rustling of a mouse beneath heavy winter snow. A grown lynx needs 5 pounds of meat a day in order to survive, roughly the same weight as a single mountain hare. Since only 1 in 4 hunts is successful, the lynx must spend a lot of time and energy searching for food. Obviously, if it is to live, it must find more substantial game than an occasional mouse. This lynx female has killed a roe deer for her and her young. They've already fed, and while her young have gone off to play, the mother covers the carcass with snow so she can return at a later date for another meal. But the forest is filled with hungry scavengers. This fox can smell fresh meat, but it can also smell the lynxes who are lingering in the neighborhood. Lynxes are more successful at hunting deer than any other animal. European deer herds have become overinflated because of a lack of natural predators. Denser herds have more sick and injured animals, which are the primary targets for the lynx. In an ironic twist, lynxes usually get fatter during the winter. The deep snows make it nearly impossible for a sick or an injured deer to run very far, so they become easy prey. The abundance of game means this family of lynxes isn't likely to return to finish its cache. Waste doesn't exist in the natural world. What one animal doesn't eat, another will. And what's left over will fertilize the forest floor. Timidly and in roundabout fashion, as if trying to look nonchalant about the whole affair, the fox closes in on the lynx's cache. The fox is cautious by nature, but winter has been hard. Alert for any sign of the lynx, its instinct warns the fox to avoid the cache. But the instinct to feed is stronger. Inevitably, it gives in to its hunger. Winter is on the verge of spring now. It is the mating season for the lynx. Each cat lives in its own territory, which may be as large as 360 square miles, depending upon the availability of food. They don't like to share their territories with each other, but once a year they call a truce in order to seek out a mate. This female is advertising her readiness by rubbing against the trees on her home range to let males know she's available. Her body produces sex hormones which have changed her odor. Any prowling male that skirts her territory will know she's in heat and undoubtedly accept her invitation to enter. Meanwhile, she passes her time by rubbing her head and flanks against any available object and then rolls on the ground with a twisting, playful motion as she waits for a male to answer her silent call. At dusk, the cries of the female lynx echo hauntingly through the forest. It is a call of the wild, a call to continue the species, a call for a truce in the long, solitary life of the lynx. The male's mating ritual involves spraying his boundary markers to warn off other males. He is advertising his availability to the female. He pushes the limits of his range closer to her, waiting for her signal to begin their courtship. Her cries may attract other suitors who also want to stake their claim on the female. If two males should cross paths, they'll posture and make threats, and if that doesn't work, they'll skirmish with each other until one drives off the other. The lynx is a phantom of the forest. It's little more than a fleeting shadow, as silent as snow. But during the mating season, the twilight air rings with the loud bass meows of males as they issue each other their challenges. Eventually, one male will triumph over the others by virtue of his bravado or cunning. And when he thinks the time is right, he'll invade the female's territory to deal with the much more difficult task of mating. Once a male and female finally locate each other, they begin a long courtship. Even though the female acts provocatively toward the male, she resists his advances. First, they'll spend several days hunting, eating, and sleeping together. Scientists believe that by testing the male's persistence, the female is making sure her mate is the resident range owner. If she should mate with a strange male from another territory, the resident male may later kill her young. So, by delaying mating, she gives the resident male a chance to drive off the pretender. The intimacy between the cats assures each other of their mutual intentions. As the female gets used to her mate, she'll become increasingly provocative and more receptive to the male's approaches. Most wildcats are induced ovulators, which means they have to mate in order to bring on ovulation. But lynxes are one of the few cats besides the domesticated cat that can ovulate spontaneously. Scientists aren't sure why, but they think it has to do with their limited breeding season. This female is almost ready to breed. Unlike a lion, which can mate with a lioness as many as 100 times a day, the lynx will mate only about 5 times a day, perhaps because smaller cats are more vulnerable to attack by other carnivores such as wolves. Finally, the courtship is over. The female signals her readiness by adopting the mating position with her belly on the ground and her rump slightly raised. He mounts her and grabs her by the scruff of the neck. Cats have a carrying reflex which renders them passive when seized by the back of their neck, just as kittens go limp when their mother carries them by the scruff. The breeding success of the lynx depends upon the breeding success of the mountain hare. When populations of the hare boom, over 90% of the female lynxes will reproduce. But if the hare population falls, then only about 1 in 10 females will breed successfully. The evolutionary link between the lynx and the mountain hare isn't easily broken. The lynx has adapted to other prey such as birds and deer, but its reproductive cycle still depends on the mountain hare. What has taken thousands of years to evolve can't be undone in a few short decades, and so the lynx must pay the price of change. As the numbers of mountain hares decrease, then so too will the remaining numbers of lynx. Soon the male will return to his territory and resume his solitary life. The female will bear and rear her young alone. But for now, they share this last moment of intimacy. The average litter size of the Eurasian lynx is 2 to 3 cubs. This mother has been rearing 2 cubs since she gave birth to them 10 months ago. They've deserted their nest, which was little more than a spot under a rocky ledge, and are touring their mother's territory for the first time. The cubs are almost ready to start new lives on their own, but first they have to learn the predatory skills they need in order to survive. This will be the only time the family will hunt together. The cubs learn from watching their mother, but they also learn from each other as they compete for their own prey. Play sharpens the cubs' hunting skills. Since the cubs were a few weeks old, their mother has been bringing them half-dead mice and rats to play with. This way they learn how to stalk and handle prey. But the time has come for the cubs to hunt on their own. By the time the family is ready to break up after 10 months, the cubs will be experienced hunters. The cubs stay close to the protective custody of their mother. They stay in touch using a 2-phase call, one of which is ultrasonic. If the mother should sense danger, she'll growl and the cubs will scatter and hide until they hear the all clear. But the lure of the unknown is irresistible, and the cubs strike off to explore everything new. While the cubs play nearby, the mother has heard something in the trees. It's a wild European boar. His proximity makes her nervous, and she decides to take a closer look. The first boar is joined by a second. They sense she is near. The lynx is no match for a full-grown boar. If she has to, she'll divert them away from her cubs. Suddenly, one of her cubs comes up from behind wanting to play. Fortunately, their commotion frightens off the boars. These are difficult times for the mother who must tolerate her awkward cubs. Right now, they're more interested in playing than in finding dinner. They'll ruin several chases before their mother can make a successful kill. But as they get hungry, they'll understand the importance of patience and cunning. By the time the cubs leave their mother's territory, they'll be expert hunters. But the real dangers still lie ahead. Their mother can't teach them the lessons they need to learn to live in woods that have been invaded by their greatest enemy, man. Lynxes die as a result of natural causes such as other predators, starvation, and disease. They also die of unnatural causes. Some will be hunted for sport by trophy hunters. Some will be killed by intolerant landowners who still see the lynx as a threat to their livestock. Others will die on roads, run over by cars and trucks. But the greatest threat of all is the trapper. In places where trapping is still allowed, only 1 in 10 cubs will survive to adulthood. In the early 1970s, the World Conservation Union pushed to reach an agreement with the International Fur Traders Association for a voluntary ban on the hunting of large spotted and striped cats. Hunting had depleted the species so rapidly that the prognosis for their future seemed dismal. Unless something was done, and done soon, the world would lose the majority of its wild cats. The unions agreed to the terms of the moratorium, and for the moment, the nightmare seemed over. But the agreement covered only certain types of cats, so the fur trade turned to unprotected cats, such as the lynx, and began to exploit them in unprecedented numbers. Suddenly, a lynx pelt, which once brought as little as $5 on the open market, was now bringing prices as high as $700. The Canadian lynx and the American bobcat suffered the worst. With such a high price on their heads, trappers killed 175,000 cats in 1 year alone. Since then, the total number of wild lynxes killed every year has risen steadily as trappers supplied the growing international demand for lynx fur. By 1950, the lynx was virtually extinct in Europe. In Sweden, Norway, and Finland, the population of lynx was down to less than 400 cats. Government intervention has helped bring up the numbers in Scandinavia, where the lynx is protected in Finland and Norway. Sweden, however, still has an open hunting season on them. Surviving populations of lynx also live in the former satellite states of Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia. But hunters there still enjoy an open season on lynx every year. Larger colonies of lynx still live in the northern forests of Russia. In the past, their remote range protected them from man. But in the late 50s, Russia started to develop farmlands in the last ranges of the lynx. As Russia continues to develop areas that have been shut off from the main arteries of commerce, more animals lose their range. And as farms build up, it'll further disrupt the predator-prey cycles that control the mountain hare and the lynx. Right now, the major concern for each republic is stabilizing its economy and finding dependable sources of food and supplies. But unless the lynx gets help from the outside, it'll be caught in a death spiral from which there's no escape. In the mid-70s, naturalists tried to reintroduce the lynx to its native habitat in Europe. Inspired by the natural emigration of cats from Czechoslovakia to German Bavaria in the 1960s, scientists relocated several adults in an isolated area of Switzerland. The experiments were a success. The founding colony in Switzerland started to expand its range into the Central Alps. By the late 70s, scientists had every reason to believe that with careful management, the lynx could return to its native habitat in Europe. Based on the success in Switzerland and another in Yugoslavia, several other countries, including Germany, Italy, France, and Austria, started their own lynx reintroduction programs. Then suddenly, without any apparent reason, what had started out so promisingly turned into a disaster. The Swiss tried to reintroduce the lynx into 2 other areas, but both attempts failed. The relocated lynxes in Germany either disappeared or were found dead. The same fate awaited the lynxes in Italy and France. Even lynxes that had migrated on their own from Czechoslovakia into the Bavarian National Forest vanished. The reintroduction program came to a dead halt. What was happening? The old fears and superstitions of the past had reemerged. The people who lived near the lynx still feared them as much as their grandparents had 100 years ago. Farmers, afraid for their families and sheep, set out poison baits and leg traps. Hunters who were worried that the lynx would wipe out the deer herds shot them on sight. More were killed by automobiles. Except in a few rare instances, the lynx couldn't survive in its original range because of man's intolerance. Nearly every species of wildcat in the world is threatened with extinction. 2/3 of all species of cats are already listed as either endangered or vulnerable. In the late 70s, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species took important steps to protect cats from commercial exploitation. In the years since, trade in lynx skins has dropped, but the lynx is only partially protected by worldwide trade sanctions. And countries like Russia that didn't ratify the international agreement are still free to exploit the lynx as long as there's a market for them. Lynx furs still bring big money on the international market. The strength of the lynx has always been its adaptability. For 100 years, it has found ways of coping with the human threat. In places where hunting and trapping have been outlawed, the lynx has made a dramatic return. Depleted colonies have bounced back. Infant mortality has dropped from 90% to 25%. But the biggest threat of all to the lynx isn't trapping. Not even international regulation can protect the lynx or any other wildcat from the rapid loss of habitat. With the world population expected to double in the next 40 years, the lynx may be crushed by a rolling wave of humanity. As bulldozers and chainsaws clear the forests to make way for the advance of civilization, the animals of the forest will be squeezed further into shrinking pockets of life. This lynx has been stalking a cock of the woods that has been busy trying to charm a nearby hen. The lynx and the birds are 2 links in the chain of life of this forest. As the new republics of the former Soviet Union struggle to find their own identities, each will have to rely on its own native resources more than ever. That means the pressure each economy will exert on its environment will continue to multiply. The real victims of the New World Order may be the animals that live in this forest. In a few years, this scene may be only a phantom memory of the past. The lynx is just one member in this community of life. Large herds of deer, elk, and moose still roam the forest. But in order for these species to survive, then so must their habitat. The lynx depends upon his prey. Other animals, such as the fox, depend upon the lynx. The life of the forest itself depends upon the contribution of all its members. And if one of them should disappear, then the loss damages the health of the forest itself. As the human population grows, it is inevitable that more wildlands will be sacrificed for the sake of expansion. The wilderness will give way to farms and factories, and the systems of life that depend on the forest either will disappear or end up on reserves. Even before the breakup of the Soviet Union, most of the republics recognized the desperate need to set up wildlife preserves. Unless something was done to protect the forests and the animals in them, then the only place anyone would see animals like the lynx was either in a museum or in a zoo. However well-intentioned, these reserves are little more than gulags for larger animals such as the lynx. Genetic diversity depends upon the male's freedom to wander to find females who belong to different genetic stock. The viability of a race of any animal depends upon bringing in new genes from the outside on a constant basis. But with the cats restricted to reserves, they will have to inbreed, and inbreeding will lead to a genetic winter. Inbreeding causes the weaker traits in the genetic pool to become more pronounced with each passing generation. If there are any harmful or lethal genes in the pool, they may become fixed. Then the captive population may be doomed to extinction. We may not only stop the process of evolution of the lynx, we may actually reverse it. In order to avoid keeping the lynx in reserves from becoming genetically stale, wildlife zoologists will have to begin a species survival plan. Species survival plans have already been developed for some cats such as the Siberian tiger, the Asian lion, the cheetah, and the snow leopard. Coordinating breeding programs between reserves and zoos will maintain the genetic diversity of isolated lynx groups. But species breeding programs require huge amounts of time, money, and international cooperation. With the breakup of the Soviet Union and the loss of centralized control, the initiative now falls on each new government in each of the republics. How long will it take before they focus their attention on their domestic wildlife crises when they're suffering social and economic crises that threaten their independence? How long will it take before they realize that their environmental heritage is in jeopardy of being lost in the name of economic diversity? Only a few voices protest, but their shouts are lost in the chaos of the crowd demanding the rights and freedoms of the West. The lynx is a resilient animal. It can recuperate from even a century of abuse provided we protect it from its greatest enemies, the trapper and the hunter. Similarly, we must demystify the cat as a cold-blooded killer of the forest. In a world that is losing 50 species of mammals and birds a year, we can scarcely afford to write off yet another. We must take an active part in ensuring the future of the lynx. Otherwise, it may be that the only lynx anyone may ever see is behind bars, an unhappy reminder of what once was.